and welcome to this episode of Authentic Achievements, where I'm delighted to be joined by the fabulous Brian Bogert. Brian, welcome.
Man, whenever fabulous gets thrown in front of my name, I know it's going to be a good day. So I am excited to be here with you. It's going to be fun. We had a great time pre-show already. So let's rock and roll, man.
Oh, I'm so looking forward to this. But before we get stuck in, because I'm sure we could probably chat for hours, let me share with our viewers and listeners a little bit more about you. So Brian is a business leader, a keynote speaker, and a human behavior and performance coach. He's the heart surgeon without a blade, which I love. And he doesn't start outside with what you need to do. He starts inside with who you are. In a world that's disconnected, Brian's revolutionising how organisations and entrepreneurs deeply connect with their authentic selves to achieve the highest levels of wealth in monetary riches, time, relationships, and health. I just love that. And I'm so excited to have you on the show because it so clearly links with everything that we're doing here, which is how do you connect to who you are authentically? But can you start, Brian, by sharing with us a little bit about your journey so far?
Yeah. I start by often saying that I'm a husband and father first, right? And I say that because I think it's important to know who I am. And I also have said for a lot of years that it's the only thing binary in my world, but I call attention to that because my actions were not always congruent. And if we go back and we look at some of my early years and some of the situations that took place, it starts to make sense why. See, when I was 7, I was run over by a truck and my left arm was completely severed from my body and it was reattached. And I had 24 surgeries in those years coming afterwards. Now I realize that's a very shock and awe element to my story, right? Like I didn't give any detail. I didn't give any context as to what happened or why. But what I can bring attention to is the fact that the more I've told my story, the more I realize how unique it is. However, the more I've told my story, the more I also realize how unique every single one of our stories is. And every single one of you listening right now also has extremely unique stories. And so what becomes important is that we learn to pause long enough to become aware of the lessons we can extract from our stories so that we can become intentional in how we can apply those in our lives moving forward. And there's a lot of embedded lessons through my story and my journey, but why I start there is because the shock and awe of this story is what I used to believe was my transformation story, that it's like my origin story, like my everything. And, the truth of the matter, which I know we'll unpack through the course of this discussion is that it's really the story that created the majority of the trash from my past that I pushed through and pushed down for years, which caused me to show up unconsciously reacting in moments that had nothing to do with what was right in front of me and creating this ripple effect of damage in my world that I didn't see and couldn't identify as the shame and the anger that it really was tied to pain that was within. And so I'm a big believer today, and what I'm doing today full time is I'm helping a lot of heart-centered impact makers identify and remove the waste they don't even know exists within their world, right? I've got this concept of identifying and taking out the trash or transforming our waste into wealth, because I believe that when our trash can become treasure, waste ceases and wealth is ensured. And that's going to give us the ability to live in the lives that we want.
Oh, wow. I love that. And I think there's so many bits. I mean, I totally, completely agree with you that we've all got a unique story. It's one of the reasons why the logo for the show is a fingerprint, because we are all as unique as our fingerprints. And it was really trying to kind of get people to connect with that. But I think you're so right. One of the things, if life's taught me anything, is that it only makes sense in the rear view mirror. It's only when you've gone through it and you look back that you can go, all right, that's what I was supposed to learn from that, or that's the gift it was made to give me. And it's changing that perspective, isn't it? And you also touched on the fact that we carry it into our future. And one of the things that I've personally struggled with and now learned from is we don't respond to what's happening. We respond to what we've made it mean. And what we've made it mean is always a link back to something we've carried from our past if we've not taken out the trash, as you say. And we don't consciously know that. And therefore it can color our future, can't it? So how do you help people to identify that trash and then either take it out or, to your point, turn it into treasure?
Yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge that there are some universal truths with all of us as humans, right? You hit on them. If I have permission, I'd love to do a slight nuance word shift for you, right? You said that people don't respond, right? Because in these moments, because they're responding to what they've made the meaning of it, or however you said that. What I think is interesting is it's actually the reaction that is happening there versus the response. The response is once we understand it, then we don't have to be subject to it anymore, right? We can start to patterns. And so that's just a slight nuance in that reaction versus response. And I'm like, yes, you're spot on. But it's also important to understand that it's these moments that we react and we don't really understand why. Okay. Now, use some understanding of the human experience to begin the understanding of how people disconnect themselves. But I'll give a story, an example of something that showed up in my house, in my marriage, right? That I was unconscious to for a long time. My wife would ask me a question as simple as this: hey, honey, what do you want to do with the kids this weekend? But my shame and my anger filter would cause me to hear it this way: hey, honey, you've not done enough to be a good husband and father here recently. So what are you going to do to make up for it this weekend? Then all of a sudden, all of my cells in my body react. I'm feeling a need to like defend. My chest puffs. I feel the wave of heat over my body, right? My heart's racing. And what do? I rattle off the 10 things I've done in the last few days to show her I'm a good husband and father. Now I've created damage. And that she asked me, right? How often in life are people in situations where they feel like they're never seen, they're never understood, they're never in a position where their intent is able to be captured, and therefore they need to justify, defend, and protect all these other unwritten narratives that are being associated with whatever they're feeling in that moment. Right? This is how we all show up. This all happens. And why? Because we're the brightest, most authentic burning light we're ever going to be. And then parents, teachers, coaches, employers start saying, you should do this, you shouldn't do this, you should want this, you shouldn't want this, you should do this, you shouldn't do this. Should's a shame-based word because it implies whoever you are and whatever you want, it's not good enough, right? And so then what happens? We start to protect ourselves because when we don't feel safe, when we don't feel seen, when we don't feel understood, we protect ourselves, okay? Now, I'm going to bring you to a really real experience in my own life because this is a moment that created the path that now lets me see and highlight it for others. When I came out of the hospital, I had a teddy bear in between my arm because my bone needed to heal at 90 degrees. So inevitably, I'm cute, and I've always had this like magnetism about me. So people always would come up and be like, hey, what happened to you? Expecting me to be like, man, I jumped off the jungle gym, or I flew off the swing, or whatever, right? But instead, I'd look them deadpan in the eye and say, I was run over by a truck, and my left arm was torn off. Now, 99% of people did the following two things. After they picked their jaw up off the floor, they would pause, and they'd turn to my parents for validation, which told me what? They didn't believe me. Right? They didn't believe my truth that I'm living and existing in my own skin. I'm wearing it. And yet they don't believe what I'm telling. It's too audacious coming from a 7-year-old boy. Can't be real. Right? And after my parents would validate that it was real, the next thing they would do is they would start to view me through their lens of what they'd be capable of in my situation, immediately limiting me, telling me all the things I was and wasn't ever going to be able to do again. Right? And so how did I protect myself from that? Well, if I'm never going to be seen and understood, if I'm not going to be believed, if my truth isn't understood, then well, shit, then I'm just going to go mentally tough and set my mindset and I'm going to go crush things and shut off everything else. Right? Like so many of us learn to do. See, I'm a high performer that learned to receive love, validation, and connection through performance, which meant it was contingent upon what I did. But here's the truth. And then I'll finish this part of the answer because it's the beginning part of our reality. We all seek and desire 4 things. We all want to feel safe. We all want to feel protected, and those are not the same thing. We all want to feel seen and understood, and we all want to feel connected. But the second we walk into an environment, we don't feel safe, we don't feel protected, again, we protect ourselves. So it could be a networking event where everybody's handing out business cards and everyone wants something from you instead of for you. It could be going back to your family's house for the holidays, right? And you know that your aunt, your dad, and your grandma are all going to look at you a certain way, make you feel a certain way. And weeks ahead of time, you start dreading it, right? It doesn't matter what it is. But the second that we don't feel completely seen, understood, connected, and free, there's a layer of guard. Now, using our analogy, if you grab those 35-gallon black trash bags and you open one up flat and you pick it up and you hold it in front of you like armor, that's what it is. It's armor. So then the question becomes, how could you properly expect anyone in your life that you love, that you care about, that you want to see you, to understand you? How could you ever properly expect anybody to see who you are, what you're willing to do, what you're not willing to do, your heart, your intent, your soul, your desire, your boundaries, your value, your worth, delivered through an opaque force field? And that's assuming that they're not carrying their own. That's going to further dilute the message, right? And so the truth is, the second we protect ourselves, we guarantee we won't get the 2 things we want most, which is to be seen and understood and to be connected at the deepest level. But the other thing is that the second we protect ourselves, we disconnect ourselves from who we are and what we want in this world. And so anybody who feels that they aren't seen, understood, their intent isn't good, they are used to being the only one in a room that they walk into, they could be surrounded by people and still feel completely alone. I promise you that you've got some trash there, and it's showing up in armor. and it's disconnecting you. And so this is where it comes to reality. The world will never judge you based on your intent. The world will always judge you based on your actions. So if your intent and your actions are not aligned, then how will the world ever be able to see you?
Oh, I love that. It's so true. I mean, one of the things I've always said is I can't choose how people behave towards me, but I can choose my response, and my response says everything about me. So that's the only bit I can own.
Yep.
And I love that whole part about, yeah, we do. When we feel like we need to defend ourselves, very often we go on the attack because it's the best form of defense. So our tone changes, our language changes, and then all of a sudden we're kind of, we're kind of having a reaction. I remember years ago realizing people don't hurt us on purpose. They're dealing with their own pain, and the reality is they don't think about us. We're just collateral damage. So when somebody hurts us and we start to try and layer in how they've made us feel, and not surprisingly, we get a really bad reaction because they're like, I'm dealing with my own pain, and now you've made it all about you. I just wanted
That's right.
all about me. So it is all back, isn't it, to that being comfortable to be seen, to be heard. And I loved when you shared about the should. I was having this conversation with somebody just the other week about unsolicited feedback. And I said, for me, one of the things that I've learned is anytime anybody gives me any feedback that starts with what I should do, it's about them, not about me. Because if they believed that I had the power to change, they'd tell me what I could do, and they'd trust that I would have the confidence, the courage, the strength to make the choice. When they tell me what I should do, they're trying to take my power, and that's not their job. I leave the emotion where it stands at their door, because it's usually their pain they're going through, isn't it? Have you found something similar?
I think it's completely true, but I also think it's unconscious bias in a lot of situations. It may not necessarily translate as like, I'm a hurt person and I'm hurting other people by limiting them, right? Like most people are unconscious to that. But to your point exactly, like we don't have to accept the word should. And the reality of it is that, again, it's a shame-based word. But how many times do people even wake up and start shitting on themselves, right? I should have gotten up earlier. I should have eaten less last night. I should have worked out yesterday, right? But here's the truth. The second we say the word should ourselves, we also lower our frequency into the shame category. And if you understand the human frequency scale, shame is the lowest registerable frequency that exists, right? Hawkins mapped it from 0 to 700. It's at 20. 90% of the world's between 100 and 150, which is anger and fear. Courage is at 400, self-actualization 700. So if you feel and you don't want to feel like garbage, you don't want to feel like trash, waking up in the morning and shooting on yourself is one of the first biggest issues. But the other side of this is I even loved the word choice that you said, because I have not found a situation yet where you can't replace the word should with could or would. What could I do differently next time? What would I do if the situation was different, right? And so it's a limiting word. It doesn't open us to what's possible. But this is also to the point that you made. We know the saying, hurt people, right? At the end of the day, like I've shifted that completely, because I learned really early that I wasn't going to get stuck by the things that had happened to me, but I was going to get moved by what I could do with them. I also believe that moved people move people. And we have the ability to open folks as well.
I love that. And it is so true, isn't it? It's that once we shift into the, what do we want? I chat to so many people. I'm so very grateful and lucky for it. But one of the things I often find is people are very clear on what they don't want, but they're not really clear on what they do want. So, all the goals that they set are in the negative. I don't want to be overweight. I don't want to be old. I don't want to go grey. I don't want to. And it's like, okay, what do you want? Because your subconscious brain doesn't have a sense of humor. So while you're telling it what you don't want, I guarantee it's taking you there at speed.
It is.
And we need to change that, don't we? We need to reset that sat nav so it's actually going in the direction we want. Have you found similar? Have you found people are good at knowing what they don't want, but not so?
Oh, absolutely. It's one of those things that it happens all the time. You ask somebody what their purpose is, what lights them up, what are they doing to fulfill themselves right now, and a lot of times they know what it's not versus what it is. But I think even to the point that you made before, right, on this concept of like feedback, right? Here's the reality: feedback is permission based. So utilizing the word should or not, like we're so conditioned to just willingly receive feedback, whether we want it or not, whether it aligns with us or not. And often it starts writing and rewriting our own narratives for ourselves, right? So many of the people that I work with later in life, sometimes we get down to a very basic element around a belief system or a saying that they have. And I'm like, whose voice is that?
Yeah.
Right. And at first the reaction is, I had a client that was telling me about a situation and an interaction with his wife, and he talks about these things, and he's like, he gets on, he's like, I don't understand. This isn't me. This isn't how I treat her, blah, blah, blah. And I said, whose voice is that? And he immediately was like, well, it's my voice. Well, if it's your voice, then it's not congruent with what you just told me, that this isn't who you are and this isn't what it is. And so it either is your voice and you need to figure out how to like repair that and align yourself, or it's not your voice and you need to give credence to where it came from.
Yeah.
And he immediately goes, oh crap, my older brother. That's my older brother's voice. Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, even that, he didn't even know that it wasn't his own voice. So to your point on not knowing what we want, how many times do people not even realize that the voices in their heads are not even their own?
Yeah.
Right. Most people believe it as if it's absolute, like, oh man, I'm hearing all these things, but that, man, you're never going to amount to this. You're never going to find happiness. You're never going to find joy. You shouldn't want those nice things. You shouldn't want to have success in life. All that shit is not coming from in us. We're not born with that, right? It's conditioned into us over time till the point that we just accept it like it's ours. Feedback's permission-based. That's why early on I asked, hey, do you mind if I give you a slight nuance and shift, right? Because if you'd said no, I wouldn't have said it.
Yeah.
Who am I to give you feedback when we just met each other?
Oh, I love that. And I must admit, I always do the same. I was sharing with somebody the other day, and I was like, I've been reflecting that we did a show on unsolicited feedback, and we came off the show, and I was like, do you mind? I've been thinking about it. Would it be okay to give you some feedback, which I appreciate is unsolicited, because I've been reflecting on the conversation that we had. And she came up and she was like, of course, I'm always interested. And then that's when I shared that, for these people that should all over you, that's about them, not you. And in my opinion, actually, if they can't say could, it's not about you. And therefore, something you could consider doing in the future is, if somebody shoulds all over you, is you could choose to leave that feedback at their door. Just to consider. I'm not going to tell you you've got to do it. I'm telling you this is the right thing. I'm just saying, please consider it. And she was like, but that's the perfect example of giving appropriate feedback, as in you checked for permission and then you gave me choice with what I was going to do with it. And I think it's that it is when people take away our power, isn't it? And I've got a little girl, and you've mentioned your father too. One of the things I try really hard with her is to distance her from the label that becomes attached to a particular thing. So she may have made a silly choice, but that doesn't make her a silly person. Or she may have made a naughty choice, but it's a choice. And so the beauty of choice is, the minute you've made one that doesn't serve you, you get to make a brand new one. So you don't have to keep repeating the same challenge. You can go, that didn't work for me. Actually, I can do something else, because we condition people so early, don't we? I don't think we mean to do it in a damaging way, but the results can be devastating to people's long-term life, can't they?
I mean, so legitimately, the majority of the work I do, the reason I have a job and am employed, is because this has been happening for generations and it gets passed down, right? And so many of these things that I call trash from people's past, and I want to give one disclaimer on this so that people can hear it. The trash from your past is not your fault. It just becomes your responsibility once you become aware of it or you start burying others in yours, right? So again, we have to remove the shame and the blame from the situation, because my wife and I traced our trash and our triggers back 3 generations. Wow. Trauma passes through the DNA, right? So even if you aren't exposed to certain things, trauma can pass through the DNA that can show up in our nervous systems, causing us to get activated into that fight, flight, fawn, or freeze, right? It's all connected. And so, yes, most of the work that I'm doing is happening in the conditioning that's taking place in people's first 7 to 14 years of life, right? I am working with a client right now who, until she was 18 years old, was living in an active war zone. Wow. And had never really given credence to all of the trauma that was absorbed in that experience. And therefore, she's only recently connected the fact that she exists often so tightly wound, and lives and exists in fear. And it was only through a set of prompted questions that I gave her to activate in a couple of moments that she was able to start to create these pairings. But the answer is yes. People layer opinions unconsciously, and I would suggest largely with good intent.
Yeah.
right? Like I have amazing parents, and I can say this because I'm not mad at them. I'm not upset with them, but I also grew up in a household where there was one right way to do everything, which also meant that I questioned everything I've done for a huge part of my life because I didn't want to get it wrong, right? Because when there's only one right way to do anything and there's no opportunity for creativity or self-expression or anything else, then what do we default to? What's going to keep us safe? And so it makes sense for each and every one of us why we end up this way. But the problem is that most people don't want to look inward and experience the pain that's going to be associated with unpacking it to understand it and actually escape it. And this is what connects to one of our core lessons, which is embracing pain to avoid suffering. Like at the end of the day, most people are like, Brian, I don't really want to flip open my lid and look inside my can. I don't want to feel like garbage. I don't want to feel like trash. I don't want to sit and unpack that stuff. That sounds like a lot of work. And then it's like, okay, well, then what's important to you? So I'll just ask you, what's really important to you in your world? Like if you had to name 3 to 5 things that just are at the top of the list, what is most important to you?
I can honestly say the most important thing in my world is Scarlett, and she is the driver for me to have gone and flipped the lid and looked at my trash, because I realized if I didn't, I was going to make it her trash. And so lots of other things are important to me, but she's my number one for doing everything.
So that's number one. What else? Give me like 2 other things that are really important to you.
So 2 other things. One is living in the moment. So being present. I spent far too long worrying about my past and panicking about my future that I missed the here and now. And now one of the things, so I did Scarlett and I have got a family mission statement that we did together last year. And that's really important to me, that this is our mantra for how we live our life. So our family mission statement is to live a life of passionate curiosity and to pass our thoughts, words and deeds through the lenses of, is it kind? Is it honest? And does it add value? And if we can't say yes to those 3, we should think again and make a different choice. And I suppose for me, that's really important, is that I live by that value set, because that's come from lots of years of going inward. That I didn't go inward. I'll be really honest. I didn't go inward until after I had my little girl. And I had, when she was 9 months old, I had a health scare that I wasn't certain I was going to survive to see her grow up. And I remember going to write the letter to tell her all the things I'd wanted to tell her if I survived. And I didn't really know where to start that letter. If I'm honest, Brian, I mean, where do you start that letter? So I crept up into a room for inspiration, and it hit me, and literally it was like the world stopped, that if I didn't fix the voice in my head, it would become the voice in her head. And I remember in that moment saying, if you give me the chance to survive this, I will do whatever it takes. I'll go deep. I'll go and look at the dirty parts that I don't want to, and I will find a way to clear them out, so that's not the legacy I leave her. So I guess for me, that's been, in the last 7 years, that's been my absolute.
That's super powerful. That's super powerful. But what I'm going to say is, like, I'm the same way as you. My kids are a huge reason for all of the investments I've made in the last 10 to 11 years, right? They were the greatest reflections of self. They've been some of my greatest coaches. They are my motivation to continue to improve as a father and a husband. But what I also really want to call attention to is like what you had said, right? And you just, even in the second part of that answer, gave exactly what I was trying to highlight, right? Because oftentimes when you actually ask somebody, hey, what if you dropped your wedding ring in the trash can? Would you dig in and get it? Right? In this case, it's like the ability to have a life of meaning with your daughter and to not actually pass on the generational patterns that you had, right? Like you had a chance to dig into your can and unpack that, because the relationship with your daughter could have been in the trash can. Right. Had you passed this on, right? So I ask, it's like, hey, do you put that, if you drop your house keys in a dumpster, if you have a family heirloom that gets dropped into a dump, would you dig in and get it? And the answer almost always for these physical items or these really representative things for people is, of course I would. Well, then why wouldn't you dig through your own muck and yuck inside to clear it out and identify and remove what no longer serves you? And oh, by the way, here's the other truth. Most of your treasure is actually buried in and formed behind all that trash pressure. So to free all of your unique abilities to actually live and exist and have the impact in this world to make you feel the ways that you want to feel, it's all buried in there, all of it. You just have to do the work. And you don't have to sit in it longer than you need to. But yes, this is absolutely a huge pattern. And it unfortunately keeps most people trapped for the majority of the decades of their lives.
It's so true. And the one thing I always remind myself of is diamonds are just stones that did really well under pressure. So if we can just deal with the pressure, then we'll find our diamond. We'll find the thing that we're here to shine. Because I think we've all got a special light to shine. We've just got to find it. And then we've got to have the courage to shine it.
You're exactly right. Here's the flip side to the statement that you made. There are many people who, again, because they learn to receive love, validation, and connection, have lived under other people's pressure for the majority of their lives. And they believe that that's the only way that they can survive. And so, yes, I agree. I'm going to highlight it and specifically say that, can you handle the pressure of actually doing the work to unpack what's inside? Because that's the pressure I want you to deal with, and to use the external pressure to actually shape and refine your actions so that you no longer remain trapped there, right? Because there is this belief system by many people, and I fit into it as well, that I was always going to deserve and needed to live in pain, or there was no purpose. And I'm sitting here today from a physical perspective to help you understand. I dealt with daily physical pain for 31 years. I'm 16 months with zero physical pain. Okay. So why do I sit here and say this? Because I believed that I was never going to see a day in my life without pain. And it was because of, oh man, I need to embrace the pain. I'm a practitioner of pain. The more I understand pain, the better. Right. So again, these same things that can make us diamonds can also keep us trapped. So make sure you understand the perspective.
Oh, I love that. Because I think it's true. The perspective is, I always say to people, context is king. Without the context, it really makes sense. Because we live in that world of polarity, don't we? For every up, there's a down. For every left, there's a right.
That's right.
Without the context, we could be viewing something from entirely the wrong viewpoint, and it's actually doing us harm, not help. But we don't see that because it's our lived belief. I remember many years ago, being asked by a coach to go and ask people that I trusted and cared about, to say one or two things that they thought were my strengths and one or two ways where I got in my own way. And they came back almost unanimously with my strengths being brave and fearless. And I was like, don't get that, Brian. At that point in my life, I lived in fear every day, fear of being found out, fear of being a failure, fear of life in general. And I was like, you're going to have to explain it to me. I don't get brave.
They saw the tough face you wore.
I don't get brave and fearless. And they were like, you will literally up sticks and move somewhere where you know nobody for a job you're not convinced you can do. And I was like, yeah. And we think that's brave and fearless. And I went, oh, I've spent all these years thinking you thought I was flighty and a little bit stupid. But I wonder how life would be if I borrowed your labels instead of my labels, and see what happens when we change that perspective, because we changed the label. And it was a very superficial way of doing it. And it was before I went in and dug in. But it helped me see that actually there is a way of not living the past that you've had and leaving the bits that no longer serve you behind.
Yeah.
And taking the lesson into your future.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, that's the whole concept ingrained in almost all of what we teach, right? Many people are judging people based on what they've done versus what they do. But the issue is that most people judge themselves based on what they've done versus what they do as well. And so, again, we've got to remove that shame and blame and help people start to come back into the present moment, which is the other area that you've learned to celebrate in your life, which is the only thing real, by the way. It's the only truth that exists, is what's happening right now.
It's so true. It's like the old saying, isn't it? That, the past no longer needs you and the future isn't promised. That's why the only thing you've got is right now. It's why it's called the present. And I always remind myself of that. If you got that on behind you,
look. I had to show this. Yeah, totally. All right. As soon as you said that, I was like, yeah, I know exactly what quote you're talking about.
I live by that, because it's true. I spent so much of my life either berating myself for my past or panicking about my future, and realizing I was missing the right now. I was missing, and I guess that for me really became apparent when I had my little girl, because they grow so fast. So all of this, you realize how much you're missing, because sometimes I'd like to go, please stop growing. Because it's going too quickly. I'm not getting enough, but it really helped me to realize, actually, where do I want to spend my time?
Yeah.
I don't want
Yeah.
to lose my focus. And I know from the work you're doing, that's what you're helping people do, isn't it? Is say, do you want to spend your time worrying about all this stuff from your past or fearing about your future? Or do you want to get really present to the right now
Yeah.
and live the best version of yourself?
Well, yeah, there is a lot to that. And I would also say that even the lived experience of what people's stated values and where they actually spend their time, right? And that exercise where I'll just ask people to say, like, what's most important? Like, what do you value most? Like, what are the core ethics, values, beliefs that you choose to live by? Or what are the things or people that are priority, right? And how often they'll outline all of that. And then I say, okay, now let's go look at your calendar. Where is all of that time being invested or spent?
Yeah,
Right. Because the other thing is that that's something that everyone always says they want more of. Right. But if you're spending your time in these low frequency energy spaces that don't feed your soul, that don't lift you up, that don't advance you forward, in fact, they keep you stuck or keep you pulling backwards, then are you really living in alignment with your values? Right.
yeah,
And are you actually allowing yourself to experience the present that's right in front of you if you can be in the present moment? And it's just really interesting to see how when this is brought into people's awareness, they start to realize that, again, well, man, I've been saying my intent over here is that my family is first and my friends are second and my health is third, but my actions have actually shown that my business is first and my health is second, my friends are third and my family is fourth.
yeah,
Right. And so it really is difficult for people to, again, escape the past and escape the future, but it's also difficult for them to even consciously see how are they living in the now when they have those chances. And I
yeah,
can tell you for a fact that you can bend and manipulate time when you can live in the present moment. You
yeah,
have more access to flow state, you have more access to abundance, you have more access to the connections that are right in front of you, right? And you have the ability to truly feel the momentum of what's possible. The other side of this is that just like a trash bag, if we held it out in front of us for 10 minutes, it's going to get heavier the longer we hold it. It's going to get stinkier the longer that it's in there and pushed down. But this is the other side of this. Look at all of the capacity that you're unconsciously zapping to carry around all that weight that you have your entire life. And just because it's fucking heavy doesn't mean you can't handle it, but that's not the point. Do you need to handle it?
yeah,
Right? If our trash gets heavier and stinkier the longer we carry it, well, the trash from our past does the same thing inside. So if
yeah.
you want more energy, you want more time, you want more focus, you want more capacity, again, clear it out and learn to live in the present because the infinite becomes possible now.
I love that. I love that. And it's so true, isn't it? You know, sometimes we carry stuff around with us just to prove that we can handle it, that we're strong enough. But it's like, it's heavy. Let's put it down. It's heavy and it doesn't serve you. There's no, you know, there's no prize for being the person who carries around the most rubbish from their past. And for me, that took you know, that took a lot of digging into before I was
Mhm.
willing to put it down, because I think there was also an element of that was the bit of me I knew. And so it was a
Yeah.
little bit scary to put that
Mhm.
down and learn to get to know a new me, the real me, but you know, without the baggage that I could hide behind
Yeah.
and utilize as my almost my get out of free jail card. Just,
Yeah.
oh, it's really my fault, you know, look at what life threw at me. But then I love a quote, you may have noticed, but I came across one and I loved it, which is, I am not the victim of my circumstances. I'm the product of my choices.
Yeah.
And that for me was an amazing one, because it's like, yeah, you get to choose. And if the choice isn't working, choose again. Because
Yeah.
we are the author of our life, aren't we? We are the ones that hold the pen. So we can change that.
Yeah. I believe that we can choose the change we want, or we can choose to change when we don't want change.
Yeah,
Right. But the issue is, and it goes back to the core lesson that my dad taught me, which is the point you're making right now. My dad always said, no matter what, guaranteed, always, in every single situation, you always have a minimum of two choices.
yeah,
Right. You might be held up at gunpoint and your choice is to get shot or to hand over all your worldly possessions. The point is, it's still your choice.
yeah, yeah,
And the second you can step into that position of ownership and start to realize that, like, you have active influence and control in the choices that you make to generate the trajectory in the life that you want, that you deserve, that you're capable of, it will always come down to your choices. And again, that's even the same thing with lived values, right? It's a choice. I'm choosing to spend and invest my time in different areas and places. I'm choosing to remain unconscious to it. I'm choosing to not do the work that's actually going to set me and my family free, right?
Yeah.
So just as active as you can be on the positive side of it, those same choices, because guess what? If you do nothing, you're already making a choice.
Yeah. Well, you're choosing to keep the same thing, aren't you? You're choosing to.
It's exactly.
keep
Yeah.
repeating, and I think it is that. Yeah, it's you're so powerful when you take the ownership for the things that are in your control. And I've had people over the past go, but Kim, you didn't choose this, you didn't choose that. I was like, well, I did. I had a choice in every one of those. If I go all the way back, I didn't have to go into that relationship. I didn't have to go on that holiday. I didn't have, there was things I could have done differently. And even if I wouldn't necessarily change those, I will now change what I think as a result of what I've learned, because I got the lesson from it. And for me, one of the things that life's taught me is that everything in it is a lesson, a blessing, or both. So when I don't feel blessed, I go and look for the lesson, and that's exactly where the blessing is wrapped up, in that lesson, that piece of wisdom that you've learned. Right, I could literally chat to you all day, but I'm conscious I'm taking so much of your time. If you could share one piece of advice, one nugget that you wish you'd known sooner, what would it be?
Yeah. I'm actually going to give an exercise because I think that it is something that brings a lot of insight to people. Again, to your point on people often know what things are not in terms of their purpose, their power, their potential. This is a place to really start to calibrate. I want everybody who's listening to create 2 lists. Okay. On the first list, I want you to write down all the people, places, sources of information, and environments that leave you feeling uplifted, that you feel full, that you feel excited, that you're full of light and love, that you could spend 8 hours there and it feels like 1 because you're in flow. You can't wait to get back to that place, see those people, do those things, be in those environments, right? We all know what those feel like. Write them down with absolute clarity, everything in your life. On the counter list, I want you to write down all the people, places, sources of information, and environments that leave you feeling defeated, disconnected, unworthy, any low frequency energy and emotion, control, perfectionism, shame, scarcity, anything that causes you to feel in that space. I want you to actually be able to go there, right? The spots that you can't imagine spending 8 hours because after 1, you're banging your head against the wall. You do not want to see those people, do those things, be in those environments ever again, yet you continue to. So here's the reality. I want you to spend more and more time intentionally on the positive side. Okay. And I want you to do whatever you can on the other side to be able to either remove, reduce, or recycle and refine the relationships or situations that take place. I understand situations where people can't get rid of everything on the negative list, but you can improve all of them and you can learn to set effective boundaries versus operating through armor. And the more you listen to yourself on these 2 lists and the more you trust your energy that's reflecting your experience, the more you will live a life of meaning and the more you will live a life that's authentic to who you are and connected to what your capabilities are.
Oh, Brian, I love that. And I'm only smiling because I often have shared over the years of like sitting down and doing your blueprint, which is what all the things that bring you joy and give you energy, and what are all the things that take your joy and zap your energy. And if you understand those elements, you can then help not see things through rose-tinted glasses. But yours is so much more detailed and in depth, which is amazing. And I know you've also so kindly shared an invitation to join your coaching community for free for 30 days. So if anyone wants to take Brian up on that, you can find him at brianbogert.com. I will make sure all of the details to get in touch with Brian are in the show notes below, including how to connect with you on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, as well as your personal website. Brian, it's been an absolute delight. I've learned so much. I'm looking forward to our next conversation, but thank you for sharing such invaluable insight with us.
Well, thank you for creating a platform for me to be able to come and pour some good into the world. And thank you for having me, my friend.
Bless you. Take care.